So my topic today is about transitioning startups to high-growth, sustainable businesses. And why I think this is important is starting a startup, that's all good. And I'm actually going to show you there are a lot of startups being founded and started every day. But I think it's also about how to build a high-growth, sustainable business in the end out of it, because that's in the end what we want, right? So the goal is not necessarily, I'm just going to found a startup. What are you going to do? You actually want to sell that startup? You want to go IPO? You want to do something with that? But isn't that the final goal? So that's why I want to look a little bit beyond kind of just the initial founding of the startup, which probably, at least that's my impression, you can tell me otherwise, is probably what you're focusing here on. But I want to prepare you a little bit to actually what's next and how you go towards potentially selling or potentially IPOing your company. So briefly about myself. So I've been an entrepreneur a couple of times. I've also founded a couple of startups. My first one, Avalas, in 1999, long time ago, was kind of the first bubble, failed. We basically ran into the bubble and that was it, the bubble bursting. Blicity was like in 2005 or so, failed. That was in Barcelona in Spain. Do we have any Spanish people here? That was a no, okay. Then 3Scale was actually then my first startup that actually worked, and we partially sold it. We just got a new funding round actually here in the US as well. I founded it in Barcelona in Spain, brought it over to the US. That was about 2008, 2009, and did my Delaware, et cetera, here, and actually built the company from here. I have a couple of other things ongoing, like Cloud Times and Amiro Group, but Amiro Group is kind of a conglomerate of everything what I do right now, and I'll tell you more a little bit in a second. I've also worked in the venture capital scene for Infocom Investments, which is a Singaporean fund. I've been an executive in a couple of companies, mainly like management consulting, Booz & Company, Oliver Wyman, T-Mobile, more industry. Now, if you're familiar with them, what was T-Mobile for sure, but maybe not the other ones. And I'm an advisor mentor with Techstars. We actually just had a batch right now that had the demo day 2 weeks or so ago down in San Antonio, and was pretty exciting to be working with the Techstars guys. Astia is a women-led or women-focused organization. Startup Bootcamp is more in Europe. But what I wanted to tell you just briefly on what Scalar is. So Scalar is where I basically dedicate the majority of my time currently on. And Scalar is a growth stage mobile industry accelerator. And why this is relevant first is obviously this has something to do with the presentation that I'm going to give you, meaning that we're trying to answer the question, what's actually next after you've gone to Draper University, after you've done an incubator or accelerator, what are you going to do next? Like, how do you get into a growth stage company? And how we do that is with a advisor network, an industry-specific advisor network, because we're focusing only on mobile, from people who help specifically in that industry, but also have the functional knowledge to actually bring companies forward. That much about myself. Let's start with what I wanted to tell you initially. I said, like, well, there are a lot of startups being founded, and I tell you in a second why I'm telling you that. So you just see here one number, 137,000 startups being founded every day. This is worldwide. And this is not so much about if it's 137,000 or a million or 1,000. I'm just saying there are a lot of startups being founded. But also don't forget that like 88% of the startups fail, and actually 10 or 12% actually make it.
What do they consider startups? Is it just any new company or
no.
specific? Or?
Yeah, so it's not just a new company. So if you open like a shop or so, this is not included here, as I understand their research. I'm also taking it from some people who did this research on that. They do startups as kind of intentionally to be a high growth business, but it could be software, it can be hardware, it can be basically everything, right? but not just opening a shop or like in second, third world countries, like do something. So this is supposed to be what we would probably call startup as well. Yeah, but all industries. And this is global. Yeah, but again, this is not my big point yet. What my big point is, there is a lot of startups being founded every day, and there are 90% of the startups fail. And my understanding is you're here to be in the 10 or the 12%, right? And that's kind of this intro. So, and this has been increasing over the last 10 years, 15 years that we're doing these kind of internet startups at least. And why is that? And I don't want to spend too much time with that because I could imagine you also cover that in other pieces here. But we're having a technology that's much easier to get that is metered also, meaning you actually only pay what you use. So if you're it's not just about buying like a whole Sun server or so that costs you a couple thousand. No, it's about the first bits and bytes that you have out there. You actually just pay for them. And are you familiar with an Amazon EC2 S3? Okay, so these are like cloud computing web services that you can get metered for your mainly internet software business. But there's also Heroku, Ruby on Rails, MySQL, APIs, web services, virtual machines, things that haven't really been there 10 years ago at all. Or services. At Scalar, we're using Google Apps for Business. We pay $5 per user per month. Great. If I have one user, then it costs me $5. If I have two, it costs me 10. But it's not that I'm setting up my whole mail server before I can get started. But also Salesforce, Intuit are the guys to do like QuickBooks, etc. Or the cloud storage services, or Skype and Google Hangout. I mean, it cuts down on your cost. The market is also more mature, meaning, like in the first internet bubble, when I started kind of doing this and kind of the end of the last century, sounds strange, so 1998, 1999, internet was kind of completely new thing. There was no apps business where you put an app out, you do some PR, and people actually download that thing and try it out. So it was extremely difficult to gain critical mass. Maybe that was possible if you're in Silicon Valley or in San Francisco or so. At least you get a couple of people interested in what you're doing. But like on a statewide, countrywide, international-wide, that was basically impossible. And that has a lot to do with the distribution here. And with distribution, I mean there are a lot of new platforms out there that you're using every day, like Facebook, like Google Play, etc., like the Apple App Store. And think about it, didn't exist before. Now it exists, and so many companies actually grew just on being on the Facebook platform, like a Zynga. No? I mean, or like some of the social dating platforms or services like Zoosk. And last but not least, it has a lot to do also with methodology. Who knows Eric Ries' Lean Startup? Okay, so majority. It's interesting, this is just a methodology, right? It's just business knowledge. But it's relatively new. I mean, I know when Eric published it a couple of years ago. And today, almost everybody is using Eric Ries' Lean Startup about minimum viable product, continuous deployment, A/B testing, actionable metrics, pivoting. Are these? Is that something my interest as well? Is that what you're studying here as well? Yeah. Okay. Good. And I won't go more into details in that. So this, for me, are the kind of the reasons why there are so many startups right now. And another one is the startup ecosystems also have their share in that. And this is from a report from Startup Genome, 2012, listing and ranking the startup ecosystems in the world. And you see, Oh, good, Silicon Valley, we're #1. So that's good, that's why we're here. And then you see Tel Aviv, Los Angeles, Seattle, New York City. Somewhere there's also Germany here, Berlin, 15. We're happy that we're at least under the top 20 here. And this is doing a lot. And this is doing a lot, especially for this area here. You have the university, you have the advisors, you have the mentors, you have the capital, you have the lawyers, you have the other experts, you have the platforms here that build that ecosystem and that help you build your business the easiest or the most feasible if you're in Silicon Valley. That's what this basically says. However, because I've been talking so much about that there are so many startups out there, it's not just about quantity, it's about quality, right? And you know, forget the 137,000 startups being founded every day. It doesn't really matter. It's interesting to know, but first you want to be in the 10%, and second, you want to have a high quality one. And that's an image I like very much. And basically I'm saying, like, building a startup is difficult, but converting it into a high growth, sustainable business is even more difficult. So you basically, what we all think about a lot about when we're doing startups is basically here onto the startup summit. And you're kind of, you know, already seeing the peak and say, oh, wow, cool, we're almost there. And not realizing that kind of after that, the growth stage starts. And this is where you just need to excel as much as you had to excel here. And it might be even more difficult to actually sell your business, which is the majority, or IPO it. So why do startups fail? Let's look a little bit into that. First of all, there are external reasons, right? So the environment came and there were new competitors, or Washington did some regulations, or there was Google coming and doing it. This is kind of a small story why Google, because I've been at so many VC meetings or pitches myself, and one of the kind of standard questions is, not every VC asked that, but a lot of asked them, so what are you going to do if Google does what you're doing? And it's always a little bit this question on, you can come up with a good answer to that, so think about a good answer. But in the end, I don't like that question a lot. Because first of all, 99% probability or more, this is not going to happen. Second, if Google is interested in that space, well, maybe they're going to buy me. Cool. You know? So this is, I don't see that as a very negative point, and the whole environment or external reasons why startups fail are not so important for me. What I think is much more interesting are the internal reasons. Is there a market fit for my product? Right market at the right time? Do I have a product that fits into this market? What about pivoting? Do I have the right UI, UX, and the right design? Design's becoming much more important, especially in the last year, 2, 3 years, than it was before. Maybe it's about my business model that failed. Everything was good. I just had the wrong business model. And so think about these things. But the most important thing where I see where startups failed, and I've seen so many where I believe actually all of this was good, except the team. And I'm not saying you're good, you're bad, or whatsoever. All I'm saying is you need to have the right vision, flexibility, leadership, dedication to make something happen, because in the end, the whole thing is about execution. And you can have a lot of things right, I repeat myself, but if you don't execute the right way, then your startup's going to fail. So what can we do, are you going to ask? There's a study, again, I'm using the same company here, Startup Genome, who also did a startup on why do startups succeed or failed. 650 startups, I think mainly Silicon Valley, 160 of them funded. And the top 2 reasons, what they have found out in a very detailed and thorough study, why startups failed, is first, founders that learn are more successful. So this is really about, are you having the right, helpful mentors? Are you tracking your metrics effectively? Are you learning from others? So really, are you not only able to learn, are you willing to learn? And that's also what I meant exactly with team before. And they found out that they raise 7 times more money and have much better user growth. And the second one was, and there was actually a long list, but these were the top 2 ones. Startups that pivot once or twice, raise more money, and have better user growth, and actually have a less likely probability to scale prematurely. So a lot of this is about, am I willing to learn? Am I willing to learn from the right people? Am I selecting the right people to help me? Because all of you, you're good in something, but you're not good in other things. And that's okay, because that's the case with everybody in this world. But you are smart, or you can succeed if you get the right people into your team, either team members or advisors or mentors or whoever, that help you fill the gaps that would be there otherwise. And Eric Ries is a very nice quote from him, again, lean startup inventor, founder. Startup success can be engineered by following the process, which means it can be learned, which means it can be taught. And that's exactly why you're here, right? So that's good. But let me tell you a little bit about kind of this process. Because when we're talking about this can be learned, this can be taught, and I want to go a little bit more into details about what expertise is required along this startup life cycle. So there's a graph out there. It's not from me. It's actually pretty well accepted these days. A structure. This is the startup life cycle, from discovery phase, validation phase, efficiency, scaling, sustaining, conservation, renewal. Could have done it more in a life cycle, like something round, but this is how it's usually displayed. And I put in the funding stages. So this is about like seed stage. You have discovered what you want to do. You have validated it. You're trying to get a seed round. With that seed round, you're trying to make your product more efficient. You try to get a Series A round, and then basically you go on from there. And this shows a little bit what you're doing in these stages, but also what functional knowledge or skills is required actually for that. So here it's about get your minimum viable product out there, get your initial validation, initial value proposition. Then here you're getting your first kind of beta testers. You're having a business model validation with actually real companies. You're pivoting once or twice, as we've learned what you should do. You get into efficiency, where it's more like about business model refinement, customer acquisition channels, and customer acquisition processes. This is completely different to here, right? And you need different knowledge here, what you need different knowledge here. And scaling is really about high growth, scalability, organizational changes, management systems, which I'm actually going to go into details in just a second. So bear with me on specifically the scaling part, because that's what the whole thing is about. And also, what I'm kind of seeing out there is there's a lot of help from Draper University through the discovery validation phase of a startup. There's a lot of help out there. And I put some logos here, and you might know many or most of them, like Blackbox, Techstars, Kick Labs, Plug and Play Tech Center, etc. That's all good, and that's actually very different to what we had, for example, when I founded 3Scale, my last startup, in 2007. All of this basically didn't exist, and that's good. And I think there is a big help out there. However, they focus all on this. I'm going to help you getting to seed stage, and then you're off. Then, you have investors that hopefully going to help you. So I kind of see that there is a gap, and this gap I want to point you on even today, although for some of you it might feel a little bit early, but I don't think it is. I think it is something to keep in mind today to build your startup, also what you're going to do in a year, in 2 years when you're actually there and actually you need that functional expertise. This is just a quick intro here. I like this graph. I don't know if you've seen it, but I've seen it so often myself, virtually on my own Google Analytics data from startups that I've been doing. So imagine this is Google Analytics, right? And you're tracking how many visitors you have to your site. And you're starting somewhere here. You don't have many because you haven't even launched yet, right? So a couple of people visited, fine. Basically your own people. And you've done some nice PR, and you were able to get TechCrunch in it, and GigaOM, and Mashable, and I mean, if you get 3, that would be excellent. And they're going to write about you and that you're starting your startup, or you're launching your startup, I mean. And suddenly, wow, the Google Analytics really goes up. I mean, massively goes up. I've seen it so many times. And you're basically here, and it's kind of the evening, and you think, wow, we're going to be millionaires in like, a week. I mean, if this continues like this, I mean, and we can't do anything wrong anymore. The problem is the next day, you kind of see that. And it's just how it is. The next day, there's a little bit more than what you had here. But again, so you kind of get into this trough of sorrow in here. And the idea is to avoid this. The idea is to know that this is going to happen. So the question is, what can you do to avoid it? And it's going to go down in any case. But I mean, do you have the right customer acquisition channels build up? Do you have the right partnerships build up? Maybe do you have some additional media relationships that are going to keep you in the news a little bit after that? So a lot of things to think about to kind of not kind of get depressed, because this one can be relatively long until you kind of fiddled through what's your right business model, what's all your right customer acquisition processes, etc. That the whole thing actually again takes off again. And now I'll do a quick excursion, you say though, into what's actually happening at Fortune 500. What's actually happening at Fortune 500s is that companies stall. So the growth stalls. It's not just from here to here, a linear graph. Even more than for startups, there has been very thorough research done for the big guys, for the big companies. And it's very interesting to see why they stall and think about if that's valid for startups as well. And you don't need to be able to read this, I mean, visually right now. This is from a book called Stall Points from Matthew Olson, Derek von Beaver. But the core outcome of this research was that 87% of the reasons why these companies stalled were under management control. So it was their fault. It was their fault. And only 13% were outside management control. So like the external factors that we had before, right? Oh, Washington did a new regulation and my startup didn't work anymore because, we're dead. Or Google came in or whatever, right? But 80% were about premium position captivity, meaning like you always thought you had the best product, but then you didn't see that there's some new entrant coming in. Like think about the no-frill carriers or so. We were United, we were American Airlines, but then Southwest came and oops, we didn't see that. Or innovation management, you're really not innovating the products that you're having. You just keep on doing what you always have been doing. You abandoned your core business prematurely. Or you just simply didn't have the right people. Again, same thing for Fortune 500 people. They just don't need just 2 people. They need a lot of people to actually be successful. So this is interesting. And again, that was it. It was just an excursion on this situation, on why you're stalling or why you're having difficulties to build a high-growth, sustainable business can be potentially very similar to what the big guys are facing, are challenging with. So let's finally get into building sustainable high-growth companies and what I think you need to do or what topics basically you need to touch. First, organizational structure. In the beginning, it's very easy. You're one founder, you're two founders, you're three founders. One is the business guy, one is the tech guy, one is the design guy, something like that. But I mean, you're here because this is supposed to change, right? And you want to build 10, 15, 30 people relatively soon. And latest then, you should think about what we're going to do about organization. Roles, responsibilities. Are we going to set up a department? Who are we going to hire? Are we going to have an incentive system? And I mean, this could be 1, 2, 3 lectures just about that. You know, I mean, stock option plans and you know all these things that you're probably also going to cover here. There's a lot to think about. Now, I'm going to give you a kind of a structure in a second, how you can think about this organizational structure. On management systems. I know maybe you're at the same point thinking, why do I need management system? You know, we haven't even started the company, or you know. But this is super important, and I will show you in a second that people actually do think about these things, and you're suddenly going to need them. So it's good to think about them, and when you want to set them up, or decide if you want to set them up, or if you don't want to set them up, fine. But you need some financial planning evaluation. You need HR planning, strategic planning. Product, sales, marketing, partnership management. Who's doing this? Things to think about. Again, I'm going to go a little bit into details in a second. It's going to be very soon about expansion. We're growth stage, right? So you have two main, or you have one important decision to do. Are you expanding internationally? So the same thing that you have been doing, we're going to do now in Canada, we're going to do now in Europe, we're going to do now in Asia? Or are you actually focusing on expanding your product? So you go vertically, for example, you get a new piece of the value chain additionally to what you have been doing. Maybe you have enough money and you do all of that and you're like the superstar, great. If not, this is something to think about, also kind of buy versus build. Don't think that you always have to do everything yourself, right? I mean, if you get especially if you have a Series A round, there's a possibility to potentially do some acqui-hires, meaning you hire basically a small team that already has a company and add it to your company. Happens every day, especially in Silicon Valley, often, many times. I don't have the number, but I see it happening all the time. Or what about strategic alliances and partnerships? So important. I mean, where are you in? Let's say you're a B2B company, and you need to set up your enterprise sales organization. Well, maybe it's easier to partner with a company that already has a big enterprise sales organization, and let them sell your business, add it to their business. I've actually had that situation a couple of times. I maybe tell the story quickly at 3Scale. 3Scale, I mentioned it before, as a startup I was doing, it's an API management solution. And we had CA, a big old company, Computer Associates, I think they were called before, now they just say CA. And they have a sales force of, I think, between 3,000 and 4,000 sales guys running around the country selling all the products that CA sells. And they offered us well, why don't we additionally sell your 3Scale API management solution to that, because it's a great fit to what they were selling. And obviously you're going to set some interesting revenue share up for them, but I mean, this is cool. I mean, how could you scale your company suddenly to 3,000 sales guys? Well, impossible, unless you're doing a strategic alliance or partnerships, or what I've just been mentioning, channel management, enterprise sales. There's kind of a new way of, it's kind of called bottom-up user adoption, meaning you're actually not just selling to the CEO of a company, you're actually coming in from the bottom of the organizational hierarchy and actually sell to the engineers there, that they get so addicted to your product that in the end the CEO basically, or the CIO or CTO in the end has to buy it because everybody's already using it. We've seen it a little bit like in cloud storage and a lot of tech things as well. And in the end, kind of to ensure that you're building a sustainable business as well. And that's not so easy, like, you know, how do you build a sustainable business? But some of the methodologies here to be using are like, try to pivot a little bit your business model. Think about your retention strategies to actually keep your customers in. So I want to go a little bit more into details into 3 of them to kind of cut time as well into the organization management system and international expansion, or expansion of product versus international. So organizational structure, and I promised I'm going to give you kind of a little bit of a structure to think about what you can be doing here. First, it's about leadership. Does the leadership have clear vision, priorities? Is it a cohesive leadership team? Second, it's about decision making and structure. Like, do you have the clear roles and accountabilities to doing decisions? And does the organizational structure support that? What about your people? Organization, individual, talent necessary for success. Do you have the performance measures? Do you have clear objective identified for your organization? And last but not least, about work processes and systems. Not last, but there's one more, which I'm going to go into details a little bit. This has a lot to do about management systems, which I'm going to go into detail in just a second. But last but not least, about the culture. And often when we talk about culture, or when you're seeing a lot of studies about culture, it's often like about Fortune 500 companies and how you're going to change the culture for Hewlett-Packard. And that's a big thing, and then the big management consulting firms come in and you pay a couple $100,000, and it's a very complex thing to change something like that. Culture in a startup are the founders. It's the CEO, the CTO, they define the culture. So by knowing this, think about the culture that you're introducing, because you're really coming from there is no culture, there is no startup, there is nothing, to we're going to introduce a culture. Meaning, like, how do you treat your employees, your investors, your other founders, your stakeholders? Do you have a mission statement, other core values, etc.? Sure, something you're going to also touch here at Draper University. Just think about that this is you who defines the culture in a company, in your startup. So this is going now very much into details, and we're not going to run through all of them. There are actually 3 slides like that. What I want to say is a very critical, crucial thing for you are management systems. And I've touched them a little bit before, kind of to explain what are management systems. Here are some examples. Financial planning. Do you have an operating budget? Do you have cash flow projections? Do you have sales projections? Very simple things. And again, things you might not be so looking at right now because you're saying, oh my God, I haven't even launched my company yet. I'm rather trying to get the TechCrunch guy in to get this spike up in from Google Analytics. But my belief is it's now also the right time to think about or to know that you're going to be needing these management systems in a relatively short time period. And I'm going to show you in a second when companies actually adopted these management systems, like implemented these management systems, or at least some of them. Financial evaluation, I mean, you see some of the examples here. Customer profitability analysis, customer acquisition costs. I mean, this is something that already in a seed round or at an angel might ask you, like, you know, what's your customer acquisition cost? And you better have a pretty good answer on that. But even more important is, I mean, in the beginning, before you start a startup, it's kind of a guess, right? And you're trying to find a good number. Well, relatively soon, you have real numbers. And you're going to know if it's $1 or $10 or $100 or much more. And this is absolutely critical. And again, HR planning, core values, mission statement, an organizational chart. Is it just two founders, and one guy's doing the business, and they're called CEO, and one guy's doing CTO, the technic, and is that it? I mean, I've been myself at a startup where me and my co-founder thought we're both the CEO in a way, because we've really never thought about it. I was doing the business part, he was doing the technical part, and we both basically assumed we're the leader here. So if you haven't figured that out, why don't you ask the rest of your team, and you think you're the CEO, why don't you tell them and see what happens? So this is the early stages, right? It doesn't hurt writing down an organizational chart at some point, and who is reporting to whom and who's doing what. And again, this is just an example, and I don't want to spare it out too much. HR evaluation, strategic planning. What are your strategic milestones? Customer development plan, headcount development plan, product development management. Maybe that's something that you're thinking more about, because it's very much about the product, how I'm actually build the product, what are my milestones, what are my KPIs there. You're showing that to investors. You're a bit more trained on that, but it can also go more into details than what you might have already. And last but not least, sales marketing management. I mean, this is a lot. I mean, especially this if you're in B2B and you're in enterprise sales. And as I said before, I mean, if you get CA, computer associates maybe in there, that give you the 3,000 sales guys, and that's great because they kind of manage it. But otherwise, it's about you, right? We're starting with the CEO and the CTO and basically everybody in the team selling, because that's how everything starts. But soon you're going to hire your first, call him VP of sales or VP biz dev or just a sales guy or something. And from there you should be thinking about what's his or her incentive system. I mean, how are we going to pay them? And is by what they sell, or is it a fixed rate or whatsoever? So CRM systems, I mean, you probably have heard about like Salesforce and Zoho, and there's some other competitors. Are you using them? Like, I mean, are you using Salesforce for that? It's a good recommendation to start relatively early with that, because you're going to have so many people that you think you're going to be selling to. There might be a big mess soon. And partnership management, don't want to go too much into details here. But what's interesting is that graph here. And again, you don't need to look at the very nitty-gritty things. These are basically the 8 management systems we've just been tracking on. And answering the question, when in the startup life cycles in years, these management systems were adopted. And you see that at least by year 5, I don't know if you can read it, by year 5, 80% of all companies had at least financial planning tools implemented. And of course, it's in the first year, it's less. But it's going to help you to have them later on the right way if you're ready to establish them at a very early stage. And the same thing, I mean, you see the same graphs a little bit for financial, HR, et cetera. In the beginning, you kind of in the first year, already 20% or so of the companies have them, or here like 10%. But in the end, or after like 4 or 5 years, the vast majority. And there's another slide, I didn't put it in because I didn't want to blow it up too much, is a slide that shows the difference between VC-funded startups and non-VC funded startups. And believe it or not, while the VC funded startups are much higher, this is an average. So the VC funded startups were much higher than the non-VC funded startups, because this is exactly what they were asking for in the end. One more thing I want to not dive into, but at least a third point in kind of what you need to do or what's going to come up in the growth stage, is that decision between either new product, so you go vertically in your product, or you actually expand internationally. And this again can be a full lecture, and I don't want to go too much into details, but this is a decision based on financial modeling, on your own business plan, on your own strategic goals that you're setting up, where you're using initially your lean startup methodology to kind of pivot and increase your product step by step. But in the same time, let's say you're in a B2C case and you're having a new social network, and you were able to put it on the Google on the Apple App Store on Google Play, and people actually are using it in different countries without you doing anything. That's the great thing about the platform, like I said in the beginning, and that's great. But I mean, you're going to receive some statistics, meaning 5% of my users are in Germany or in Canada or in Asia. And your question is going to be, you can't just leave it as that, or is that a strategic way of thinking, do I have to enter this market? Do I have to do something in this market? Do I have to do marketing there? So here kind of a little bit the steps you do, kind of a strategic review. You do a country prioritization and saying, well, which are the countries we actually want to go into? And it might actually be not that difficult. Maybe you don't even have to set up an office yet in this country, but you run, for example, some campaigns specifically in this country. You can do that from San Mateo, just via Google AdWords, right? And then kind of an early assessment, and then local office and staff planning is kind of the next steps, how to do a geographical expansion, if this is the strategic decision that you have been taking. So that covers it more or less. See, my own thing here says 52 minutes. So I'd love to get over to Q&A, and I hope I can answer the questions.
I was curious more about Scalar. You say you're a mobile accelerator. Where are you located, and how many applications are you going to take for that?
So Scalar, we're based in Hatch today, formerly the Hatchery on 645 Harrison, San Francisco. Again, it's focusing on two things: on mobile. So mobile industry, meaning anything from this is an app to this is a software that a mobile carrier would buy. So anything of that is mobile for us. We're taking 5 to 10 companies per batch. And we actually have a application running right now and actually closing actually this week or within the next couple of days. Yeah, was that the question? Yeah.
How much money are you giving Scalar?
Okay, so Scalar itself is not a fund. We actually work with investors who then fund the company. And the reason for that is, don't forget that Scalar is focusing on growth stage companies. So this is, we are basically in beyond the incubators and accelerators that have potentially brought you to a seed or Series A round. We take it from there. And the core need is actually not the money, because you've just raised that money. That's why we don't focus on it. We focus on strategic alliances, like get you into the mobile carriers, into the OEMs and the handset manufacturers, and build open doors there. That's the idea. And then we work with investors who kind of are able to invest in the company whenever they want, but it's not kind of this demo day and 3 months demo day and then hopefully you have a seed round or not. It's a little bit different.
So since you would encourage founders and creators in very early stage to think about divisional labor, and also I was thinking a lot of things you said are very difficult for people to just have the startups when they didn't have a lot of money and human resources, they had to borrow a strategic partnership to even use someone else's resources for maybe financial or something of a larger scale. Then at what stage do you think we would get someone be serious about letting us use their resources for?
And what resources do you mean? So say that again.
For example, you mentioned there's just a lot of
Should I go back to something?
Yeah. So for the leadership all of the states, we can probably do ourselves. But people, sometimes the startups maybe have 3 people or even 1. Some people don't have to be in my company, but I can actually borrow someone from someone else's company. But then when
Yeah. Okay. I think, yeah, I understand your question now. So, I mean, this is a critical thing, right? And I mean, you first of all, you kind of have your startup before you even get founded. You have your startup money, and that's your 100% of shares, right? Be very careful with that because it's 100% and then it's gone. Can't raise more. I mean, you can raise more, but you know what I mean. It's there's going to be gone at some point. But it's definitely a currency which what you can pay a little bit. Yeah. So so you're saying we're going to use different companies for that. Well, I would say you're trying to buy advice and mentorship from people or from companies, right? And that's why I'm saying it's very beneficial to have to look around who can join your board, for example, right? And well, I either don't pay them, fine, or I give them something in shares often, or I try to join, try to have other people join me as other advisors because they like me so much, or because I found them at Draper University or so. And I would say you can't start early enough with that. I mean, I think way before you start the company, I think you should think about that. And I think it's also a natural process because while you're talking to the whole world about your product, well, you're talking to people, and some people like it and some people don't like it. But it's a very critical decision who you believe, who is able to contribute the knowledge that you require. And basically what the theme from my whole presentation is, or the kind of what to take home is, this functional knowledge is going to change over time, right? So you might need different, or you will need different knowledge in the first month or the first year than what you're going to need in the second, third, fourth, fifth year. And it might change again and again and again, fine. And so what I'm just trying to bring over is, first, think about that. Second, think about what you can do, meaning you have an advisor in only for a year or whatsoever, but then only pay him for that year. Or you believe it's somebody who really knows everything from day one to like 5 years and who has done 5 IPOs before, great. Yeah, then maybe that's the guy you should take in for 4 or 5 years. But often this is not the case. People have functional knowledge and they know something. Like I said in the beginning, you know something and they don't know other things. And please don't pay them for the things that person doesn't know. And that's accepted by everybody. So be able to get this guy out again and pay him his share. It's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, but then there's another thing, which is basically very often is the co-founder problem. You get people in, give them a share of the company, actually they don't work with it. And then later on, you can get them off as easily without bringing something out of the company.
Yeah. Well, this is a lot about vesting, right? And again, there's a lot of knowledge, studies, thoughts, methodology, and everything about that specific problem. We can't go that much into detail yet, but there's a lot. I've seen one thing. I mean, there's the standard thing. You're 2 founders. You found the company here locally. I mean, you register the company. Everybody has 50%, non-vested, done. That's, I think, how most of the companies are founded. That's the mistake I've done many times, right? So, but maybe it's smarter, and there's some even financial models out there who say that every month you basically stay in and the dedication you have in, so you multiply by dedication, because it could be that one is 100% in, another guy is 50% in, the next guy, these are 2 senior guys. The third guy is actually a very junior guy. He's in 100%, but you don't want to give him like a third or so because he's more junior. And then the older guys say, yeah, but this guy. So there's kind of a, you can probably Google it also a little bit or kind of think about it yourself in terms of, dedication. I mean, percentage of time you're giving, seniority, and then time that this person actually stays in the company. And you do your own calculation of that, whatever is fair. Again, there's some studies out there, but this is critical, and this goes the same in the end, goes for the mentors and advisors, actually very similar. Just that they maybe dedicate 1 or 2 hours per week instead of 24/7, but same thing.
How does profitability change as the firm grows?
What do you mean?
So you're saying about firm growth, there's functional scalar responsibilities, but about maintaining, how does the profit margin change as the firm grows? Do you have less or maintain profitability throughout the growth stage?
Yeah, I mean, good question. First of all, yeah, we're talking about a phase that is ideally already profitable. I mean, it's often even not, right? I mean, we had a lot of companies, even the big guys, who actually reached profitability only far beyond kind of growth stage, because it was all about just user acquisition, and they were still in the minus, right, in the red numbers. But profitability actually decreases often while the company actually goes further. So you might have some initial spark of growth in the beginning, which you're not able to keep often. So meaning you might have 1,000, you might have, let's say, 100,000 in your first year, or 200,000 or something like that. You might get a tenfold into the next year, right? So you get like 1 million or 2 million or so in revenues. It's going to be very difficult to keep that tenfold over, forever. So it would be almost like a logarithmic curve. So that profitability in the end might decrease. Is that kind of the question you were asking? So it's impossible to keep that up, but you don't need to. Yeah. I mean, growing by 20-30% instead of 100%. Or 10 times or 1,000% is still good later on, right? And especially when you're Fortune 500 companies, then it's impossible to have 10 times.
Do you suggest to have a mixture of similarity of the companies, so that some people will have more time involvement and knowledge, in knowledge of ideas, and some other people will actually have more of the management and networks?
Yeah, if you can. I mean, it's also not so easy, right, to always. I mean, I think the most difficult challenge that you have when founding a startup is getting your team together. That's the number one hurdle. And the product, I think, and the product idea is, well, you've seen there are 137,000 ideas every day, so there are a lot of ideas out there. In the end, if you don't have the right team together, that's the critical factor, and that's kind of also what I try to bring over. And do you want to have a good mixture on that? Kind of more senior people, more junior people? I think it's difficult to say. Principally, yes, that's great, because you are tapping into different knowledge that you're kind of bringing in. And even if you're very young founders, and you can't do anything about it because you are young and you have this idea and you want to go, and that's fine. But yeah, I mean, why not bringing in a bit more gray-haired, not that much, but maybe 10-year older guy who's running your VP BizDev or COO or CRO, like for Chief Revenue Officer or something like that. That's good, I think, because you can learn a lot from this person. Yeah. More questions? Good. Thank you.